Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I'm bringing all this up is not to put you in the spot. And then here you are again today, right?
Yeah.
And we need to talk about this, the incident, right? Like, why is that so? How did you not realize that, Mt. Gox was, broke?
Welcome back to another episode of Blockcast. My name is Timothy Mazier, the managing editor here, and I'm joined by Mark Tan, who's the CEO of Blockhead.
Hey guys, how's it going?
And our special guest on this video episode, Mark Karpeles, the former CEO of Mt. Gox.
Hey guys.
Oh, Mt. Gox, if you're not familiar with the whole incident and saga, was one of the world's first Bitcoin exchanges and at its peak accounted for about 80% of trading volume. It launched in the summer of 2010. And Mark took over in 2011, if I recall correctly, when he was only 24 years old.
Yes.
It spectacularly imploded in 2014 amid heightened speculation about untoward activity. This story has been told many times, but the fall of the exchange was prompted by the loss of about 750,000 Bitcoin at that time, I think worth around 500 million. Of course, now it's worth, in the billions. We'll get more into that later.
I mean, for context, right, it has been called the greatest hack in the history of cryptocurrency, right? That's been...
And finance in general, yeah.
Right, and I mean, it just boggles the mind, right? If you think about it, right? 2010, 2011 is when Mt. Gox was around. Some of our listeners and viewers, right? They're probably 10 years old when that happened.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we are old, man. So I guess that's something that I was thinking about, right? Because a lot of 18, 19-year-olds right now, they're buying Bitcoin. They are, getting involved in DeFi, staking their shit. Yeah, they were like 9 when this happened.
But having said that, if you were around during that time, old enough to remember the Wild West days of crypto, I mean, it was a lot of experimentation, rebelliousness, or counterculture influence in the space, and all these stories. We're going to get Mark to tell us more about. But Mark, how did you even get involved in this? And I mean, you were really young when you took over the exchange, and you had a background as was it a programmer or?
Well, actually, back in 2009, I moved to Japan. And in Japan, I created a new company, which was called Tiban at the time. The name was actually the name of my cat, for a little bit of background. The company at the time was doing web hosting, so we had customers all around the world, or more exactly, I had customers all around the world who wanted to put their website online or things like that. One of those customers actually happened to be a French guy living in Peru. And because he's in Peru, his French card usually would get blocked for fraud or, it's suspicious having a French card coming from Peru. He contacted me one day and asked me if I could accept Bitcoins for payments. And I looked into Bitcoin, so that was middle of 2010. I found Bitcoin very interesting, so I still started discovering it, reading the white paper. There was a very small community at the time, maybe like 50 to 100 people. I got involved in the community. I started accepting Bitcoin payments. So I had to implement the whole automatic payment system and so on. After a while, I had more customers, and this person who initially created Mt. Gox started contacting me, and we worked together a little bit on, I helped it a little bit on different things. And that's probably why a bit later, beginning of 2011, he contacted me, asked me if I wanted to take over the exchange.
So what I mean, I know this is quite a straightforward question, right? But yes, it seems very straightforward now that, Bitcoin is worth 65,000 US, I think, something like that, right? But back then, right, when it was such a small community, what drew you to it? What did you think about it in terms of hey, look, this could be an opportunity here?
Yeah, the main aspect of Bitcoin really that I liked at the time was the technology. I found about Bitcoin. I tried it. Actually, I did try to mine with my CPU at the time. And one night later, I had 50 Bitcoins. So it felt like Bitcoin was very easy to get. Maybe it doesn't have much value. So I was a little bit wondering, should I be going on with that or not? But there was a market. Bitcoin was trading as maybe 10 cents a Bitcoin or something like that. So I figured that if I had to convert my price in Bitcoin and get enough Bitcoins, that would cover the price. And makes sense. But more than that, what's really interesting was the idea of a shared balance database, which is a blockchain basically, where everyone knows the balance of everyone, and a payment can be verified very easily.
I know that the one thing about, I guess, narratives, right, is that they kind of shift, but it feels like the Bitcoin narrative has remained fairly consistent over the past, I think, 10 years or so. Would you agree with that? the idea that it is essentially a store of value. It's digital gold. It's some point an inflation hedge. Don't know, yes or no. If it is, it is. If it's not, right? And but back in that day, it was really like it provided an alternative to like the central banks and capital market systems, right? Like, did you look at it then like that already, or was it really just like
Well, I say at the beginning, at least at the time, people who were involved in Bitcoin were more looking at it as a new technology. There were different things that were possible, but Bitcoin was still very small and you couldn't easily spend Bitcoins. Very famously, someone paid for a cup of pizza for 10,000 Bitcoins. You had Bitcoins, there was no easy way to spend this. You could buy alpaca socks, you could buy pizza and different things, but Mt. Gox was the first exchange actually offering automatic trading and an actual market for trading. This helped give Bitcoin a value that was a little bit more fixed than like 10,000 Bitcoins equal 2 pizza. We went to 1 Bitcoin equal a few cents, and very quickly the price grew. When I took over Mt. Gox in March 2011, we were around, I believe, 1 Bitcoin equal $1. So we called it the Bitcoin parity. Even at the time, Bitcoin was still very far from being a potential store of value because it didn't really have value yet. Satoshi Nakamoto at the time too was looking more in Bitcoin as an experiment than something that's supposed to be used widely. So he said it himself after a few times. Bitcoin was really a sandbox at the time. The idea was to create different things. There was even a market planned to be included in Bitcoin at some point that was stripped from the code. I think between 0.2 and 0.3.
I'm sure you have some thoughts of where it was then and what it is now, but I think maybe we can get into that a bit later on.
Yeah, I'm curious, like, under your leadership of the exchange, just within 3 years, it's rise and fall. But before we get to the fall, how did Mt. Gox become such a dominant player in the crypto market?
Well, there are different things. One thing is positioning, because Mt. Gox was very much the first exchange out there. From the beginning to the end, the focus was to make it easier for people to move money in and out of the exchange. One thing I worked very hard on was to get banking partners, methods for people to move money, basically. So there was Mt. Gox in Japan. In Japan, we could do international transfers, of course, but we created Mt. Gox Poland for handling all of Europe. We had also a subsidiary in the US for US transfers. We had a banking partner in New Zealand. We were working on opening something in Ireland too. So the main focus of the company was, of course, to make it easier to move money in and out, so anyone could easily buy or sell Bitcoins. And I believe that's also the focus of most successful exchanges today. The secondary focus, of course, was to make everything. I mean, I say secondary, it's not. It's actually not secondary because it's a primary focus too. But there is an acquisition focus, so the focus to make people on board the exchange, and the focus to actually run the exchange and keep things running as much as possible, which involved talking with regulators, trying to get people to understand what Bitcoin is. So I do believe we talked with more than 20 countries, regulators, about what Bitcoin is. We actually hope to get Bitcoin regulated because it would create a clear track on how to operate. But at the time, most people didn't understand what Bitcoin was. And I would guess that most regulators didn't guess or even imagine that Bitcoin would get this big. So most of the time they would just tell us, no, it's not a regulation. We're not going to regulate any single thing that comes our way.
Personally, did you feel it was like I'm not sure if this has been asked before, but was it a leap for you to go from, essentially you're a technologist, right, to being the CEO of an exchange where you had, essentially be dealing with regulators, thinking about compliance? What was it like?
Quite challenging, actually. Actually, before I came to Japan in France, I was working for a fairly large company that was dealing in software sales, and I was managing part of the research and development, and I was also in charge of all the payments and compliance, which means dealing with payment compliance like PCI DSS and a whole lot of things that we had to deal with at the time. So going from this to crypto was not actually this difficult for me, but it turned out that for many countries, Bitcoin was not something that they saw very positively from the beginning. In 2011, when I took over Mongox, there was also the launch of Silk Road, the first very large drug market.
Yes.
Most regulators didn't hear about Bitcoin from us, but from news about Silk Road, which made the discussion a little bit more difficult than it should.
That was where I was going with my previous question about the rise of Mt. Gox, and I think it also paralleled the growth and popularity of Silk Road. I'm curious, back in the day, what was KYC like on Mt. Gox?
At the very beginning, when I took over Mongox, there were no clear KYC or anti-money laundering rules. Everything was a little bit on the, if anything looks suspicious, maybe we can consider it suspicious. Any large customers, like if you wanted to move around more than $10,000 a day, we would require you to submit ID documents. But after that, when I took over, I started to create more clear policies on KYC. And specifically, we had new limits that were set, $1,000 a day, $10,000 a month. Afterward, the exchange became larger, and we started to have regulators talking us into getting KYC on all customers. The problem is, at that time, we had maybe 600,000 customers. So getting everyone KYC was not possible, at least not instantly. So we started to establish rules, lower the limits, and I think around customer 600,000, something like that. We required KYC for every single new customers, and we worked on getting everyone else KYC too.
I think there was a stat that I saw floating around that Mt. Gox's exchange volumes fell by about 30% after Silk Road was shut down. Is there any truth to that?
I don't think so, because actually the volume itself is mostly people doing trading, a lot of speculative trading and things like that. We did identify a few Silk Road accounts afterwards, thanks to the DOJ request of information and so on. But it turned out that, for trading, Silk Road users would only trade for one specific transaction and things like that, while day traders would trade back and forth quite a lot. So in terms of volume, it was very small.
That sounds logical. Much has been said about how this industry essentially funds the other industry, or facilitates Silk Road. I guess, is there anything you want to say at this point, right? You've been through a lot, you've been to jail, and then you got acquitted, and then you're back, and then you were working for a private VPN as a CTO, right? And then just really in terms of just the number of interviews that you've done, it's been quite rare. I think in terms of, there have been a few interviews on CoinDesk and fairly recent ones. I think when the FTX incident came up, right? But I think just to kind of somewhat close the chapter on Mt. Gox, right? Is there anything new you want to add to what people already know? Certain questions that have come up, right? Like, who did the hack? That's been asked, right? I'm not sure whether you have the information or not, right? So I'm not sure whether you want to go there, but anything you want to share about, I guess, the experience, life in prison for that short time? How do you feel now? They're out, and do you feel like you have a platform to make a difference?
Well, I do know as a fact that Mongox made a difference and a lot of things in terms of crypto, because especially with its bankruptcy. In Japan, actually, this was a trigger for a lot of people to learn about Bitcoin. We only had maybe 2 or 2.5% customers in Japan, yet for some reason the bankruptcy press conference was live on all nationwide TV, which maybe sounds a little bit going too far, but that probably was a big story at the time. I did spend a lot of time, this was 10 years ago now. From this bankruptcy to today, I went through a lot, to say the least. But I do think a lot of the information that's right there, everything is already out there. So, bankruptcy in 2014, my trial actually started in 2017. 1 week after the beginning of my trial, finally, the US law enforcement managed to arrest Alexander Vinnik. So the timing actually was very important. It didn't do much in the end because the trial for Alexander Vinnik is still pending. He will be, I think his trial run is scheduled in September of this year. So there's something that's probably worth tracking.
You made a post on Twitter about how the necessary materials that you had to acquit yourself were prepared on a calculator that you bought for like $120.
Yes.
It sounds pretty wild, but how did that happen?
So actually, the Japanese system, especially the legal system, is a little bit backward, to say the least. When you are accused of something, you're typically arrested and detained until your trial, which is not common, for example, in France, where this would only be for very grave crimes or actually doing something like being a danger to society. So I was detained into a small room, about 10 square meters, and my lawyer managed to get me all the documentation on the case, which included about 20,000 pages of accounting information of the company. One of the main reasons I was accused of embezzlement is because the company made only that much. They calculated about $12 million of money in 1 year, but spent $60 million. So they said because you spent more than you earned, you took money from the customers, so you've done embezzlement, which was it's a lot more complex than that, but just simplifying the fact of the case. Sounded really weird to me because I knew we made a lot more money than that. But it turned out that the bankruptcy happened end of February, and the end of the fiscal year in Japan is end of March. So the last year of accounting was not closed by me, and I understood later that the trustee hired an accountant to do all the accounting and everything. They didn't do a very good job at closing the accounting. My goal was to go through 20,000 pages of numbers on accounting information, just to try to maybe find revenue that was not, find out what happened to my money, the company's money. Having to go through 20,000 pages of accounting without just a pen or a paper is, of course, something I wouldn't want to go through. And I looked a little bit on the detention center I was at the time. They had bully actually on the list of things you could buy. So I called the guard and I tell them that I want to buy this because I need to do calculations. And they asked me, "You sure you don't want a calculator?" And I learned that it was possible to buy a calculator. It's not on the list of the things you can buy, but if your case includes anything that's numerical, like for example embezzlement, you can get a calculator. So
love Japan, man. Yeah. Japan is just great that way.
And they showed me they had 3 calculators I could buy, so I took the best one. But
it gave you options as well.
Yes. I took the most expensive one, which had like solar power and things like that. $120 is, I think, a lot more than the calculator actually was.
Okay.
Because it could do like addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and square root.
Okay.
For some reason, but still it allowed me to go through, and I spent probably more than a week after that, every single day, going through all the accounting information. And very quickly, I found about $5 million that was not in the accounting, which was just enough to go through from $12 to $17 million, and showing that there was more profit in the company than they assumed, which automatically means that the initial accusation was wrong.
Yeah, and based on that, I guess the prosecution's case is just definitely not as strong because on first basis, the company's net profitable, so it'll be hard for them to justify. I guess that's weird. That
was just a strict minimum to get this because I wouldn't go through everything, at least not with that calculator. So that allowed my lawyer to get me freed on bail. And once I was freed on bail, I was able to use computers and did some more calculation. I managed to find out that we actually made $40 million that year in cash alone. A lot more in bitcoins, depending on the bitcoin value.
Right. And what was it like in the detention center? Was it, I see no experience in the Japanese detention centers.
Yeah, Japanese detention centers are very... every single day is mostly the same thing. Like you wake up in the morning, they do a roll call, then you get your breakfast, then you do nothing, and then there's a lunch at about 11.
Did they give you bento boxes?
Yeah, actually you have your own plate. that you need to wash yourself into the room.
Okay.
They would say, like, for example, today is the big plate plus the small bowl or something like that. So you prepare these. They just come around and put the food inside.
Like a Buddhist retreat, basically.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I guess then, since we're on this topic, the big question here, how did you not realize that, Mongkok's was, broke, in the lead up to it, right? So if you think about how withdrawals kind of started in 2013 and then where it ended off. I mean, from what I understand, right? So like, the people started, the bank run started happening as far back as 2013, right? But I think it was only 2014 where it's kind of discovered, or like, you found out, quote unquote.
Yeah.
So, and this has been asked before. How did you not know earlier?
It's a little bit of a complex question. There's a lot of...
Sure. I know I'm simplifying a lot of things. Yeah.
One thing is that at the time my focus was not on dealing with the withdrawal issues. And you can call this a bank run, and some people may have had issues since before, but most of the transfers actually were processed as long as we didn't have an issue with the blockchain. We did have some issues because of transaction IDs. There's something called transaction malleability that shouldn't have been an issue, depending on the way you deal with transaction IDs. But Mongox used to, when we issue a Bitcoin transaction, track it by its hash. Turns out that transaction malleability allow any miner or anyone on the blockchain or on the network to alter the transaction ID, which means that the transaction that ends in the block has a different ID. So it's like if you go to the bank, you make a transfer to send $100 to someone. The bank tells you, okay, your transfer is being processed, it's number or something. And then you come the next day to the bank and you show them the transfer ID, and it tells you, no, there's no transfer under this ID. But if you look on your bank statement, you see that the transfer went through.
Yeah.
So it's not going to block transfers or do anything you didn't want to do, but Mongox actually did some tracking based on this. Because we did have some transactions that didn't go through, we automatically retried transactions that we didn't see. We had customers coming to us telling us that the transfer didn't go through. We checked the hash. Considering Mongox handled more than 2,000 transactions a day, we couldn't go through every single transaction and see, did we send or did we not send something to somebody. We check only with the ID. And in those cases, we would automatically resend the transfer. So
I guess if the summary here is that you did the best you can. You could at that point in time, right? Also came across, like some AMAs on Reddit. I think Magical Tux. I have some questions about that.
That would be me.
Right. A reason why I'm bringing that up is because, I think in 2016, you did some AMAs about, like, hey, I'm the founder of Mongox, ask me anything about it. And, community was pretty aggressive. And then here you are again today, right?
Yeah.
And we need to talk about this, the incident, right? Like, why is that so? Like, what's in it for you now?
What's in it for me? I'm not sure there's much in it for me except dealing with hard questions. And actually, at some point after the trial was done, I expected that I wouldn't have to do anything with cryptocurrencies and try to move forward into a different direction. But it turned out a lot of people in the community still came to me, especially in Japan, and tried to ask me, what I would do next or what would be good for crypto and so on. I'm still not sure what I can create new. I did help a lot of people to try to, for example, working on exchanges, tell them how to not go the same direction as Mongox went. And I realized that there's something I can do here is to make sure that the experience, all the issues, pain caused by Mongox can actually become useful. Try to bring this as a positive for everyone. Even today, more than 10 years after this event, the crypto world has evolved a lot in different directions. We know we have hundreds of exchanges, but at the same time, there's a lot of things I see and I feel that there are still things to learn from Mongox, ways we should do things differently and that are not done yet.
Do you trust centralized exchanges?
Not as they are today. I do think there's a lot that can be improved. For me, an exchange needs a lot of things. They need transparency, they need good corporate structure and so on. There's different things that can be improved, and that's one reason I'm here today is to make sure, to try to bring forward technology
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I'm bringing all this up is not to put you on the spot, but really from you're a member of the audience looking at this, right? You've for the kind of trouble that you've gone through, most people would just say, okay, you know what, I'm going to find another industry.
Yeah.
Right? But for you to still be here talking about it, it must mean that you really care about the space.
Yeah, I do care a lot about the crypto space, and there's different reasons for it. One is, I mean, Mongox was 3 years of my life, but those were very intensive years. Then there was 10 years of going through all the aftermath, which also involves trying to help people going through the bankruptcy process, because it's a Japanese bankruptcy. There's a lot of complex things. At some point, I was due to receive $1 billion from the bankruptcy because Bitcoin value increased and the claims were valued at $500 million, which I also worked with some of the creditors trying to push things in the direction I wouldn't get anything, and we managed. Today, I'm not going to receive a single cent.
I mean, in a way, you would kind of like, you and the creditors would essentially be forced to hold. And then by definition, you know, like there is that, there is the upside there, right? Do you think history is going to repeat itself? I mean, like you see, well, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because, I mean, the most recent one being the FTX collapse.
Yes.
Right? And
I can tell you something actually here on this right now. You know, Bitcoin is on a 4-year cycle, right? Every 4 years, as a return you get from mining Bitcoins, halves and so on.
This halving is coming up.
Yes, it's a few days from now. Yes.
Good timing, guys.
A lot of people, especially in Japan, see centralized crypto exchanges bankruptcy also being on a 4-year cycle, because you had Mongox. 4 years later, you had CoinCheck in Japan, which was very much Japanese exchange, so it didn't affect too much people overseas. And 4 years later, you have FTX. So right now, on mostly a 4-year cycle, you've got this kind of big thing happening. So of course, it's not always the same reason. Mongox and CoinCheck were both hacks. FTX was not a hack, but there is one big catastrophe happening so far every 4 years. So if you ask me if history repeats itself, so far it looks like it's doing that.
I mean, it's a great perspective, because the reason why I'm bringing this up is, like, you know, people are saying the same things about FTX, and they said about the previous exchange collapse, and they said about Mongox the same thing. You know, oh, it's just a bad actor. Bitcoin is fine. You know, technology is fine. You know, it's just a few bad actors in the space. It'll be fine, right? But for me, you can always trust human beings to act a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, it also affects the reputation of the industry, right?
Right.
And each time one of these incidents happens, there's a long rehabilitation process, and the whole industry needs to recover, at least in the eyes of the public, and there's a lot of PR that needs to be done around this. But along those lines, I wanted to ask you, 2011 and now, the picture of Bitcoin, its supporters, the narrative has shifted dramatically. I just want to get your thoughts on the institutionalization of crypto, because when you were involved, there was still very much a bastion of counterculture, and now it's been co-opted by the boys in suits.
I mean, in those 10 years from Mongox, things have evolved very much, actually. And even today we see it with FTX, which had a much smaller impact on Bitcoin than Mongox did at the time. So there are different things happening, but I think the biggest is that the market is getting bigger. Right now you have many more exchanges on the market, which means that one exchange collapsing is not bringing everything down as it did back in the days. We also have better security systems. I mean, when Mongox launched in 2011, Bitcoin didn't have any option to encrypt a wallet, or I mean, encryption was not something people knew much about even back then. So now we have hardware wallets
and the different custody solutions now.
Yes, so many more options, and even for custody solutions, you have insured custody solutions. There's things we can do today that we couldn't do in the time. While you're always going to have bad actors, the kind of impact they can have on the market will be much more limited. So yes, things have evolved quite a lot.
Do you like how do you personally feel about it being, I guess from a very subjective point of view, it's a lot less cool now, right? Because you have essentially your people in suits.
Wall Street is involved.
Wall Street is involved.
Yeah.
Does that change your view in any way? In how you look at Bitcoin as
Well, actually, for me, the time Wall Street started to get involved was in 2011, after this article was published in the Times, I think the Times, yes, magazine in the US, where suddenly the Bitcoin community was no longer like a few hundred tech guys working together, but you had people coming in and seeing Bitcoin not as a technology, but as an investment opportunity, which meant that, I mean, this is when things really changed for me. So if you tell me today you've got the guy with suits, I mean, they've been here since
right.
2011. The fact actually that there are more people coming in, you have got the Bitcoin ETF started and so on, in a way shows how Bitcoin has changed and things have become more stable. So I do think it's a good thing on one side, because for Bitcoin it's big milestone, I believe. But at the same time, as a purely tech person, I'd like to see more new things
being built on that chain.
I mean, the blockchain technology to be used for more things.
Okay.
That's one reason why I don't look only at Bitcoin, but also at other technologies. I like, for example, what Ethereum did a lot. Smart contracts and so on have opened a lot of possibilities. So I really like to see how things evolve over time.
I mean, I was just wondering about if you have any fond memories of tinkering with crypto tech back in the day.
I do have a lot of memories, not all fun, because sometimes it was very much of a pain to get things working, especially since Bitcoin used non-standard curve in ECDSA. So I did write for Mongox back in the day, system for storing Bitcoins using, it was a crypto PP, crypto++ library, which was a C++ library. I didn't have a lot of trouble to get it to work. But overall, I mean, the blockchain system and the technology itself is very interesting. It has a lot of challenges. And I think still today, there are challenges to run this kind of technologies and creating new technologies. But I do think that Bitcoin has shown that this blockchain system, where you have a decentralized ledger, public key signatures, can be used to create very interesting systems.
Just to bring it to today, right? Like, so we talk a bit about centralized exchanges, DEXs, right? What would you say is like the biggest impact from Mt. Gox that you see today?
Well, I mean, the biggest impact is the creation of a new word, Goxt. This one is probably remained for a long time. Because actually what happened when Mt. Gox went into bankruptcy is exchanges all over the world starting to publish their liquidity assets and so on.
Brian Armstrong and a whole bunch of others came out at the time.
Proof of reserves, right?
Yeah, proof of reserves. They did this for half a year, 1 year, and then they stopped doing it. And they did again after FTX, and then they stopped doing it again. So, I mean, people don't learn, or at least don't learn enough, I believe, from this. So that's something I want to make a difference with in the future.
Okay.
Trying to push exchanges to be more serious. Not only publish proof of reserves, but make sure that reserves are, for example, insured or held into a separate custody company. And that applies to exchanges. That also applies to stable coins, I believe. Because you want to go from a centralized exchange to a decentralized exchange, you still have a lot of risk involved. I wouldn't trust a DEX more just because it's on the blockchain. You need a lot more to be trustworthy.
What would you say some of the issues that you have with DEXs right now?
I mean, the main issue I see today is stablecoin side of things. There are a few stablecoin options out there. Can you trust all of these? I wouldn't put my trust at least in that yet.
I mean, the amount that they really have of them is quite scary.
It's not because you go to a DEX that you can just put all your money in and just leave it there. It's always important to gather your things back and make sure you don't put more than you can afford to lose, because there are so many risks. There's a risk the third party you trust is not trustworthy or has a technical issue. There's a risk your wallet provider gets hacked one way or another and push an update that steals your keys or anything like that.
Not your keys, not your...
Yeah, even if it's your keys, the way you store these can be very important. I see a lot of people, when you set up MetaMask or something like that, they ask you to write words on paper. People write words on paper, then they take a picture of it on their phone.
Oh, that's the same thing, right?
Yeah,
that's still hot, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's not how you're supposed to do it, but the problem is people want convenience.
Yeah.
If you tell them, okay, you lose this, you lose your money, they're going to want to keep it. And what better way to keep it than a picture in your...
I mean, for me, it's always been one of the biggest ironies of this space, because for as advanced as the technology is, right, at the end of the day, when you think about custody and security, right, the most secure methods are still offline, right? But I also think that until the debt is solved, if you want to see real kind of, everyone essentially has like kind of like a wallet, right, and it's like buying coin. We need to solve that because fundamentally, we're not used to it, man. Everything now is just so like fast food, like I need it now, and no one wants to be bothered with that. Yeah, I think that says something. I mean, like I have all my shit offline, but that's because I did have some money, I think, in FTX when it shut. So not a lot, but it's still like it taught me a lesson. What are you currently working on now? I mean, you're here on this podcast. You clearly are looking to get your name out there again. Are you looking to rebrand yourself, or are you looking to, or is there a project you're working on? Or what's new?
Well, I mean, there's two reasons I'm here. The main is as a way to come back because, I mean, the Mongox bankruptcy is finally seeing its last chapter. We're seeing the payments being made since the end of last year. So it's actually for me a very important thing because it's been 10 years in the making and I didn't have much impact on it because it's a legal process handled by the courts, the trustee. If it was me alone, I would already have made all the payments and we'd be done with it. Things are not that simple. That turns out. So that's one thing. And the second thing is I'm thinking of doing things to try to improve the communities cryptocurrencies in general. I do believe that the Mongox experience can bring a lot exchanges or even any crypto project today in a way of how things shouldn't be done and maybe to try to see how things should be done from there. And one of my goals is going to try to make the crypto industry safer and easier to use for everyone.
It sounds like you're on a mission to educate almost, like a...
Yes, I do think education is very important. Education on one side and also try to find new solutions, maybe technical solutions to make things more convenient and find the right balance between security and convenience. Because if you go too far into security, it's going to get confusing. People are not going to use it. But if you go into the convenience direction, people are going to get hacked or things are not going to work well. So there's a balance somewhere to be found.
I mean, we are looking forward to, your next few steps.
I'm curious, is there a Netflix documentary or movie in the works?
I don't know if it's Netflix, but there is definitely documentaries
nice
in the work.
And did you manage to get Jack Black to play you?
No, unfortunately.
I think in the Reddit AMA you said that's who you like.
I mean, I like Jack Black a lot, and he would have been very nice.
The other one that I think would be great is, but he's not around anymore. Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Oh, for sure.
Anyway, we digress.
It's been great speaking to you and listening to someone who's had a front row seat to the development of Bitcoin and the crypto industry, in its early days till now. Thanks again for coming on the show and thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for having me.
Looking forward to seeing what comes next.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.